all the presidents have a copy of the questions. But we will not necessarily go in order like this, maybe just kind of just bounce off of each other. Now there is that raise the hand feature, but it's just for presidents, so I think we will be okay. I don't think we'll be talking over each other too much.
I'm getting a message from one of the presidents. Let me call our host and I'll mute myself.
Okay.
Community, you can name WTVA as I asked for an interview with you about our candidate, are you okay with doing that today? And I was targeting school costs,
Did you see the email from Ivy Taylor? She was asking for the link to this meeting.
I'm trying to get her now.
Okay.
Okay, we got Dr. Taylor on.
Hi.
Dr. Woodward.
Dr. Hart, let me know when you're ready
You
to run the
presidents
music
are
as
so
well.
busy. I appreciate this.
Dr. Hart, let me know whenever you're ready to run the music.
Okay, let me see. Is Dr. Woodward on?
Looks like she just, oh, she went off and came back on. She may be having some connection issues.
Dr. Woodward?
Hello.
There she is.
It took me a minute longer than I thought it was going to take me. Thank you.
All right, so it's 12:15, so we want to start letting people in. I'm going to reach out to Dr. Mary Graham from Mississippi Gulf Coast once we get started to see if she's having problems. But Melissa Faith, would you go around right quick and just fill in Dr. Taylor and Dr. Woodard? I'm sorry, I'm giving you a whole new name.
It's Woodward.
Hello, ladies. How are you all doing?
Thank you.
Awesome. So what we'll do, I don't want to take up a whole lot of time because we want to kind of get to the discussion. I'll let each of you introduce yourselves. Just tell a little bit about your background, your institution, the institution that you represent. And then we'll just kind of go into the questions. The idea, because I know you all have a list of the questions. So the idea is to make it more of a conversation rather than like an interview where I'm going, okay, now you, now you, now you.
Okay.
If you want to jump in, everybody's muted anyway, so it should be fairly easy. Once everyone has had a chance to answer the question, there may be something you might want to piggyback off of. If someone says something, if you can relate to something and you want to share an experience, awesome. And then I'll just keep it moving as far as me asking questions. Once we hit about 45 minutes or so, then I'll let everybody kind of wrap up, and then we'll see if there are any questions from the people who've been watching, and then we'll go from there. Does that sound doable?
Yes.
All right, so let's start letting them in. Thank you again.
Latoya?
Hi,
Hi, Mary Graham here. We had a little issue signing in, but we're here.
no worries, no worries. We're just letting all the participants in right now, and then we're gonna get started.
Okay, great.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of our president, Dr. Felicia M. Nave, and the Alcorn State University Steering Committee, I would like to welcome each of you to our first Women in Higher Education Mississippi Network webinar. As many of you know, we would normally have our annual conference during the month of February, but of course, the pandemic just won't allow us to host a large event. However, we thought it was important for us to still connect in some way. To that end, we have planned webinars that we hope are informative, inspirational, and impactful. So every area in your life will be a success. Our first webinar features a discussion from some of our state female leaders who are leading us during uncertain times. And I would like to take this time to thank each of them for taking time out of their busy schedules to join this discussion. Just a few housekeeping issues. We will reserve about 15 minutes toward the end of this discussion if you should have any questions. So if you do, please post them into our chat box and we will get them to the moderator. With that being said, I am going to turn it over to our moderator, Fox 40 News anchor, Miss Melissa Faith Payne. It's yours. Thank you.
All righty, thank you so much. And thank you for asking me to be a part of this event. You know, I don't think any one of us thought that 2020 was going to be the year that 2020 was. And it has certainly changed the way we do things, obviously, with the way we have this webinar set up and how this annual conference is now being held via Zoom and allowing so many people to see each other and be around each other. But we're all gathered here to talk about this pandemic and how we have all had to adjust ourselves in lieu of what's happening all over the world. So we'll start off by having each of our panelists introduce themselves, tell us your name, a little bit of your background, and also tell us about the institution that you represent. And Dr. Woodward, I'm going to start with you because you're first right here on my screen.
All righty. Am I unmuted?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm Lou Ann Woodward. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this today. I'm delighted to join all of you. And I see that we've got like 188 or so participants. That's fantastic. So my name is Lou Ann Woodward. I am the Vice Chancellor at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. I'm also the Dean of the School of Medicine. And my background is emergency medicine. I'm a Mississippi girl. I've lived in Mississippi all my life. I got my undergraduate degree at Mississippi State University and then came to the University of Mississippi Medical Center for medical school and never left. It's a bit of an unusual path, and it's certainly not something that as a first-year medical student, if anybody had told me that years later you'll still be here in Jackson at the same place, much less in the job I'm in, I would have been certain they were crazy and wrong and all sorts of things. But it has been a real honor and truly a delight to be here and be in this role. We are the only academic medical center for the state of Mississippi. And this last year, boy, what a year, has really been a year when I think the unique things and the unique work that we can do here to benefit the state has really, we've been able to show that, whether it's demonstrating the ability to develop a COVID test over a matter of weeks, to working with the Department of Health, standing up testing and taking care of very sick patients, enrolling patients in clinical trials, all of those pieces. I think all the components of the academic medical center this year have come together and have really, we've been able to demonstrate, I think, our worth, if you will, to the state of Mississippi. We have a strong research component, an education component. We have about 3,000 learners here on our campus, and then of course the clinical care. So there's a lot going on, and it's just been a fantastic journey. I am delighted and feel very honored to be in the role that I'm in. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much. Dr. Taylor?
Hey, my name is Ivy Taylor, and I am president of Rusk College, which is a small liberal arts HBCU here in Holly Springs, Mississippi. This was unexpected blessing for me. I've had a non-traditional career. This is actually my first higher education leadership position. My background is in urban planning. I started my life's journey in Brooklyn, New York, was raised in Queens, attended Yale University for my undergraduate degree, got a master's in city planning from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and then moved to San Antonio, Texas for love. Well, first for an internship, then I met a man. He got me to stay there for 22 years, and I spent those years working in city government as a city employee, and then as a council member, and then as mayor of San Antonio for 3 years. I also managed to get in a stint teaching in the public administration department of the University of Texas at San Antonio. So that was my first taste of higher ed, working in higher ed. And then while I was serving as mayor, I became a member of the Board of Trustees of Houston-Tillotson, which is an HBCU located in Austin, Texas. After serving as a trustee and observing the president up close and personal, I thought to myself, I could do this. And then when I left City Hall, I pursued a doctorate in education at University of Pennsylvania. And so in April, when I was finishing my dissertation and preparing for my defense, I got a call for an interview to be president of Rusk College. And so things happened pretty quickly. So I've been here since June 1st. Rusk, again, is a small college. We've been around since 1866, when, of course, we were established to educate freed slaves. And we have created and continued a legacy of providing quality education for underserved citizens for over 150 years. One of our most illustrious attendees was Ida B. Wells, who is known as an early social justice activist and suffragist and journalist. And so she serves as a point of inspiration for us, and we want to continue. We're continuing that work of creating leaders here to meet the challenges of our nation today here at Rusk College.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Miller.
Yes. Nice to see all of you, and glad that we've got such great participation. Dr. Woodard, want to thank you for your leadership and for all that UMMC is doing for the state of Mississippi, and really proud of all of that. I am president of Mississippi University for Women, which is the first state-supported college for women in 1884. We went co-ed in 1982, and in a normal year, we would have about 3,000 students here on campus. Our total enrollment isn't much below that now, but most of those people are virtual. We've limited our face-to-face classes and our residence hall occupancy. I came to the W as a student from St. Louis, and much like Dr. Woodard, if you had told me, or actually what was funny was when I was named interim president, we had our homecoming, and it was one of my reunion classes, and one of the students, an Irish student who came from Ireland for our reunion, and somebody told her that I had just been named interim president, and she just peeled out laughing, and she said, "Nora, no way." So anyway, I was here at the W as the chief financial officer for 18 years. And so I took a non-traditional route to the presidency also, but very proud to lead my institution, and very proud of what we as a campus have accomplished and are doing to keep our students and our community safe at this time. So thank you for inviting me to be a part of this.
All right, thank you. And Dr. Graham?
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry that we're not able to meet in person. It's so much fun to present to the WIM group. You girls are a lot of fun, and we usually cover a lot of material. And I appreciate LaToya and her team and all the folks that are hosting today to not let COVID stop us from sharing big ideas and meeting each other. So thank you all for doing that, and thank the speakers for agreeing to jump on the line and share some conversation. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I am a Mississippi native. I actually attended Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College right out of high school, and now I have circled back as the president, and I've been president here for 10 years. I've actually worked at Gulf Coast for 33 years this year, so I've had a history at Gulf Coast. My degrees are from the University of Southern Miss, started in counseling psychology and finished with a PhD in higher ed administration. So a little bit about our college. We're one of the largest community colleges in Mississippi. We were just ranked as having the #1 nursing school in the state for community colleges, Nora.
Okay.
Nora's #1 when you add, okay, just a little bit. You guys beat us by just a little bit. But anyway, we are great partners with the W, and I want to point that out to all of you that Nora and I have signed some agreements, and it's a great pathway for our students. So thank you for that, Nora. But we are, as I said, a large institution. We have over 20,000 credit and non-credit students. We do a huge amount of workforce training because we have Ingalls Shipbuilding and Chevron in our backyard, and we work with all the major hospitals and banks all along the coast. So do a lot of workforce training, but we were also named the #1 community college in Mississippi this year. So all those accolades we like to share because we're super proud of that, and we strive for excellence every day in everything that we do. So we employ over 1,000 individuals that work at Gulf Coast Community College. So we're one of the largest employers in our 4-county district that we serve. So we're proud of that as well. So I'm glad to be with you guys today. Enough about me and Gulf Coast. I look forward to the questions. So ready to move on.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's just jump in. I'll just jump in and start asking questions. The first question, things are obviously different in 2021, 2020 compared to how things were just 2 years ago. So when you're thinking about the decision-making process and how you've had to make decisions for your institution, for those that you govern, for your students, how has that changed as a result of the coronavirus pandemic? Dr. Taylor, I'll start with you.
Well, for me, nothing has changed because this is my first gig as president, and COVID has been the context since I arrived. And it's funny, when I started sharing with people in San Antonio that I was going to be leaving to take a job as president of a college, many people said, with COVID, this really is not a good time to be a college president. And my response was, yeah, but it's really a much worse time to be a mayor for a lot of reasons. So really, I have that kind of perspective, even though I wasn't mayor during a pandemic. I kind of use that as, kind of my guidepost that, and COVID just has been the context for me. So I've had to always have that approach with that as the first thing, knowing that that's what everyone is asking themselves. You can never provide too much information, and you have to be extremely flexible and quick to adapt. And I did get some experience doing that in the political arena. So, but I will be glad when I can experience what it's like to be a president without this context.
Okay. Dr. Graham, you've been in your position for 10 years, so there is definitely a difference from this year and last year compared to how things were a few years ago. Speak on that and how you've had to change your decision-making process.
Well, Melissa, it's an interesting question because, we live in Hurricane Alley on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, so we're not afraid of an emergency or a crisis. We're well trained for that. The COVID pandemic's been a little different because in a hurricane, people come to your aid and it's only affecting your area, so you have a lot of support. The thing with the pandemic is everyone's suffering equally, and so what we have decided as a team at Gulf Coast, and I have an amazing leadership team and we have amazing employees. My philosophy is never waste a good crisis, good opportunity for change. And so what we've done is really brought our team in, looked at some of the challenges, and made some decisions about moving forward. Our folks have a lot of grit, a lot of enthusiasm. And so in spite of the pandemic, we are moving forward. We're doing some amazing things. We've added millions of dollars of technology to adapt and adjust. I use the word pivot a lot today in a presentation I did earlier. You know, we have just seized the opportunity to get better as an institution, and communication has been key. I know that Dr. Taylor mentioned that. Your folks have to have some direction and understanding, and they have to kind of get on board with the vision for the institution. And so we've communicated a lot. We've not let COVID stop us from fulfilling our mission at Gulf Coast. We've just found new ways to do it. And to be honest with you, we've implemented a lot of change, a lot of creative and innovative thought. And that's really boosted a lot of the efforts and the morale at Gulf Coast. So I don't want to act like I'm happy about the pandemic, but I'm happy with the way we've responded to the pandemic. People have stepped up to meet the challenge and done some amazing things that I never thought could happen.
Okay, President Miller, jump in there.
Yeah, I think we're seeing much of the same also. We were well situated as we went into this because we've been in online education, and it's something that we do very well. We've been recognized for having, one of the best RN to BSN online programs in the country. We've been recognized as having the best MFA in creative writing, for having the most affordable online business degree. So we did online well, so we were able to adjust to that pretty well. We've always had, plans A, B, and C, and we've just realized that we need to go on through that alphabet, and that we will go through each one of those changes as things have just been so fluid. We've involved a large part of the campus in making our plans. When we were developing our plan for reopening this summer and for fall, we had over 40 members of the campus community helping to build that plan, and communication and trying to be as transparent as possible to let people know what we're doing, what's happening, and that we're all in it together. And it's up to each one of us to help keep our university safe. And so I think we've done a good job, and we're learning, that things like this can happen. And I see changes that we will, recognize, and that we will keep implemented afterwards. So it has been a telling experience, and I think we've grown from it.
Okay, Dr. Woodard, I'm really interested to hear from you, because it's not just you guys have dealt with emergencies before, but now your own workers are the ones who are at risk as well of contracting the virus. So in addition to running your institution, you have to keep your workers safe who are trying to help everyone else.
Yes, that has been, it has been a year, I'll tell you. So my own personal background is emergency medicine, and I honestly think that had prepared me well for the kind of role I'm in, where you make important decisions very often with an awareness that you have incomplete information. And as an organization, we've responded multiple times over the years to hurricanes and tornadoes and been part of that disaster response. I think the primary difference in that and now is tied to just the duration. When there is a hurricane or a tornado, the impact can be very long lasting. We've all seen that in the state many times. But the heat of the moment around the emergency response is time limited, whereas this has gone on and on and on. And now we have as many patients in the hospital today with COVID as we did last August. So there's that feeling of what is our endpoint. And internally, there's been a lot to balance. We have not been able to have people work from home. Nurses and doctors and respiratory therapists who are taking care of patients have to be here to take care of the patients. And so we want to be sure that we're providing a safe environment for them to do that in, despite all the uncertainties and the unknowns. So I heard every single president mention communication. And I think if I could underline something, it would be communication, 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 especially when you're in a situation that none of us have dealt with before. And we don't know the answers to lots of questions. We don't know how long this will last. You know, we've learned a whole lot about this virus compared to where we were this time last year or even this time last summer. We've learned all kinds of things about treatments and protocols and all of that, but we're still learning. And so it I think has been the need to communicate and to communicate with confidence and calm. I think I've said the word calm more in the last 14 months than I ever have in my life. You know, we just have to be calm. Because as the leader, your level of confidence and calm really sets the tone for people all around you. They're looking to you for that demonstration of how worried should I be. But being able to maintain a confidence and calmness, but yet explaining this is what we know and this is what we don't know. This is what we think. And so these are the steps we're going to take. That has been a balance, trying to balance the communication so that people understand we are learning. And part of the, you know, there have been internal challenges with that, with workforce members who want to feel safe and who are fatigued and frustrated and just weary. And then also with the public that looks to us for answers. And in some cases, we don't have the answers yet. We're learning as we go. And that is something that I have found, especially in the social media realm. People don't tolerate that concept of, we don't know everything about this virus. We're learning. This is what we know now. That has been a challenging piece of it. But the communication, I think, has been the piece I would just underline over and over and over. And I've heard it from all my colleagues here today.
I'm going to stick with you because I want to talk about transparency when we're talking about communication. Transparency, especially in light of this pandemic, has been so important. Is there a point where you think you have to, though, hold back because you don't want to share too much? Or how important is it to tell everything that you know, but still try to keep people calm?
You know, I think it's a balance. I do think it is a balance. And I think it's a balance because we start to see things. You know, you start to notice that perhaps some certain aspect of treatment, the patients, you know, have a better outcome if you do this rather than that. You see one or two or three examples of things. You get word through the FDA or the CDC that you think a vaccine will be here on some date. But while it's still in the phase of, but we're not sure, you hate to say things that then in fact may turn out to be a fluke. So it is a balance. You certainly want to share news as soon as you know it, but you don't want to make a profound statement about every little data point that pops up, because, you know, it will be several years before we really know the whole impact of this virus.
Right. Dr. Graham, I'll go to you because when it comes to being transparent, you have to be transparent, not just to your staff, but also, and this is to you other three ladies, to the parents of your students who have questions and concerns, especially those of you who have students who are on campus. Dr. Graham, talk a little bit about transparency and how you try to do that balancing act.
Well, you know, it's interesting because we went to a completely virtual environment. And so communication left the classroom as we traditionally know. And one thing I have learned through this whole process, and balance, Luann, you're spot on, there's a balance. But what I have derived from this emergency situation that we're in with the pandemic is you have to communicate. So we had 3 different pathways. We had a keep learning page for students. We had a keep working page for employees. And, you know, we just continue to push out information to the extent that as people would ask us questions, we would respond, but we would put the question out so that other people who wanted this answer to the same question could get that information. But let me tell you what I learned. the way that you present information, you can do it in a very positive way. People feed on your emotions. And if I were to get hysterical or get angry or get frustrated, that would be the end game for the people receiving the information. And so we were very strategic with the tone of our message and how we put it out there. What, Luann, you made a good point. We didn't know everything. So in many cases, we were pushing out new information on those sites daily and sometimes hourly. But what we would preface with, as of today, this is what we know and this is what we're doing. This could change, but we're always looking out for your safety, your health, and to provide as much information as we can with the knowledge we have today. But it was really critical the way that we controlled the messaging, because people's reaction was really based on the tone of what we put out. So it's really an important thing to remember in an emergency, of course.
Okay. President Miller?
I agree with everything that's been said. And throughout the summer, in the early months of this, we did regular video updates where I would do messages and I remember the first day of class that we had this fall, we were all ready for it, thought we had everything accounted for, and then we had an outbreak of 3 positive cases in one class and ended up with 75 people having to be quarantined. And, and the message that I gave everybody that day was take a deep breath. We prepared for this. We didn't expect it to hit us on day one with this magnitude, but we've got plans in place and we're going to be okay. And we are. We've just kind of rolled with it. I think people have become more used to the idea. When people are missing for a few days, you get a little bit of panicky, people wondering, why somebody's out or why an office is closed down. But we've just had to roll with it. And being at a small institution where we don't have a lot of bench depth, it has put some real strain on our staff, because if somebody has to go home to quarantine because they've been exposed or their child has, we're seeing that where parents are having multiple cases of having to quarantine because their children get exposed. But it's, we've adapted well, and I do think giving a positive message and setting that example. I am very conscious of wearing a mask always, and of, I don't eat out in restaurants unless I'm out of town and can't avoid it, trying to really stress the importance of each of us to keep everyone else safe. We have to really weigh our choices when, is this worth it? Is this something that I really need to be doing? So.
Dr. Taylor, what about you and how you've had to be transparent with parents there at Rust and with your staff?
Yes, just a few thoughts in these areas. One of the issues that I struggle with, the additional context for me, was just coming in as a new leader and people not knowing me well enough to know what to expect. So I had to be very intentional in setting the tone early on. And of course, with this being new and evolving, it did present some challenges and opportunities for me to, think about what was the best way to approach the campus and sharing information. I remember one of the first COVID cases we had, well, actually it was what was reported to me was that someone was symptomatic and they were getting a test and we were waiting for results. And so in my mind, it didn't make sense to share that with everyone until we knew whether, it was positive or not. And, this was the first one and I didn't want to cause a panic. But by the next day, a staffer came to me and said, look, people are already talking and saying, well, are they going to do a cover up? Because they didn't know me. And so then, so that was one of the important things, is to make sure you keep your ear to the ground, listen and respond, because sometimes as a president, you can be in your own little kind of C-suite bubble and you may have 10 or 12 people that you regularly speak to, and you may need to know outside of that what people are thinking and feeling and ensure that you can respond to that. So then we really had to kind of judge on a case-by-case basis what the communication vehicle would be. Of course, we tried very hard to share as much information as possible, but then we had to balance that with the concerns on not causing, a panic, or and also, as was mentioned earlier, striking that right tone, the positive tone. I will share that, we were really focused on what would happen in the event of an outbreak amongst the students. We had everybody developing every possible scenario of where students could go, where could they quarantine, isolate, what will we do? What if they need health care, their meals, blah, 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 all that. And then in the middle of all that, we got a positive COVID case in the cafeteria, amongst the cafeteria workers. Now, Russ College does not outsource the meal preparation and service of the meals. So then everyone that worked in the cafeteria had to quarantine. But we had students on campus, and guess what? They still had to eat. So it was kind of like, oh, we really needed to be prepared on more than one front. So then we had to, of course, let students and parents know right away where we were. And then we had to quickly pivot to a community engagement strategy where we actually had, local restaurants and food trucks come and provide meals. I also just want to provide just a few thoughts just while we're on this topic of COVID. President Miller had noted about, the choice to try and avoid restaurants. And I definitely, while I agree with that on one hand, I guess maybe it's the urban planner and mayor in me that's also very concerned about the impact that all of this is having on our local businesses. And so, although that was kind of a bad situation for us at Russ with all the cafeteria having being quarantined, it was an opportunity for us in a small town to be able to support local businesses through outsourcing the meal preparation and meal distribution. So we tried to make lemonade out of lemons. I think we were able to create some new relationships through that. The other thing I just want to throw out just for everyone's consideration as we think about how we react to COVID is the disparate impact of COVID on minority communities. And so, as an HBCU, we definitely have to be mindful beyond just the campus. Our students are experiencing a lot of stress at home because many of them come from, low income backgrounds or single parents. In fact, I heard a story last week of a student who is from another state who is having to pivot. He was on campus, but now he will have to pivot to distance learning because his mother's a single parent. He has a younger sibling, about 10 years younger, and that school district decided that they were not going to go back to the classroom, and the parent didn't have anyone to keep the younger sibling except for this, but for the student who's here. We're very thankful that that student will be able to continue their education because we gave everyone laptops. And we are, obviously offering classes online. But I just think as you think about communication and what messages to share and how they'll be received, it's important to remember that context as well of how some of the students' families are being impacted by COVID.
You bring up a really good point, and I kind of want to throw that to everyone. A lot of the institutions have seen a lot of growth through virtual learning and distance learning. This question is twofold. A, how are you able to retain students? Because it has to be hard, I would imagine, to retain students in this new COVID environment. And then secondly, if you've had some online growth, do you see that continuing as we move through and maybe to make it to the other side of this crisis? I teach a Zoom class and I love it. I never want to try to go back into a classroom. It's great to teach, from the home. But do you think that is something that will continue? And Dr. Graham, I'll start with you.
Sure. I think what we'll see, Melissa, and we experienced it last semester, primarily we were virtual. We did have some seated classes because we teach a lot of hands-on career and technical programs that weren't conducive to virtual. So we were doing limited class size and things like that. But what I think will happen, people who were never virtual before or did online will grow to have a comfort level with it. As you said, you love it, you never want to go back. But conversely, there'll be some students who feel like a better learning environment for them is in a physical classroom. So the key is going to be balancing that and offering some of both. We do something called hybrid, where students can do some online, but then they can come in and consult with their instructor and work with other students in teams and things like that. So I think that's important. But let me tell you one piece that we haven't talked about that's critical. Irregardless of if it's virtual or seated, you have to provide those wraparound services to students. And we have done that. We set up a whole online student service support team. We were calling students to do wellness checks. Do you have connectivity? Is the laptop we loaned you working? Do you need to come in and get resources? Do you need tutoring? So we were constantly reaching out. And again, we have a lot of students. So our student support team flipped completely online. Several of them had COVID, but were working from home, making like hundreds of calls a day. So people need to feel grounded in a crisis situation, and they need to know there's a lifeline. And so not only did we adapt technology, we adapted our student service division as well. And that really, really paid off in the long run in terms of retention.
Okay, President Miller.
I think that's very true. Having those services, our counselors, we hired an additional counselor because the emotional impact on students is very real. All of our counselors are able to do telehealth. So we've been able to maintain contact with students who couldn't come in or didn't feel comfortable coming in. Online tutoring, online resources in our library, research assistance for our students. That's all very key to this. I see, I think we will continue to have face-to-face classes, and we will continue to have online. And I think more and more are going to have some kind of a hybrid approach where perhaps they'll meet face-to-face one day a week, and the other 2 days, maybe small groups working online or in other ways. But this has given people exposure to a different way of doing things, and I think we're going to be the better for it.
Okay. Dr. Taylor?
Yes, as a school that's been very traditional in its past, when COVID hit, really Russ did not have an online presence. Everything was in-person, face-to-face instruction, and so we had to pivot very quickly. And so we recognize what some of the challenges are, what some of the benefits are. And so we're, carefully working through that, learning from that. What's been interesting is I think students who did not previously appreciate being able to go to class, who have to study online, are saying they're eager to get back to the classroom. And anytime you can hear a student say that, that's a good thing. We have a hybrid format where our freshmen and sophomores are in class a couple of days a week in person, and then online a couple of days a week in person. And then juniors and seniors are doing 100% online right now. We anticipate in the fall, if things continue to go well with vaccine distribution, that we'll be able to return to the classroom for the most part, but we will not completely abandon our online offerings. And in fact, what we've discovered, once folks attend Russ, even if life gets in the way, they still consider themselves to be a Bearcat. And we've had several people who had moved on with their lives to contact us and say, I've heard that Russ is now offering online classes. I'm back in St. Louis, but I want to get my degree and I want to get it from Russ. I want to finish where I started. So we are definitely going to be creating more options for those students because we definitely want them to be able to fulfill their educational goals. And if they're committed to getting a degree from Russ, we want to provide the platform and format for them to be able to do so. The other thing that I mentioned that we've done that we will continue is to provide students laptops, because what I learned when I arrived in June is that students who had been sent home in March as a result of the pandemic, again, we serve many students who come from disadvantaged homes, they actually did not have computers at home. And many of them were trying to continue their studies via their mobile phone or having to go to libraries just at times when people were discouraging gathering in those types of places. So we definitely want to continue to provide our students laptop computers so that they'll have the opportunity to have the tool, most important tool that they need for the education. And then finally, just to piggyback on what some of the other comments were, we found that as many students are in this virtual space, the need for us to ramp up on communicating with them through various means. We entered a partnership through U.S. Department of Education, put us in a pilot program that allowed us to access a company called Trellis, and they send out text messages to our students on a regular basis. That was not a capability that we had previously in-house, but so we do that, and then we also are just getting on the phone and calling students to check in, either their academic, either faculty or our advising and student support unit. So those are the things that we're doing in this brave new online, enhanced online world.
All right, Dr. Woodward, I would imagine that some of the classes, some things are not, you can't do online when you're in medical school and when you're in dental school.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So much of our education really is hands-on patient care and cannot be converted to online. We have simulation labs, we have online modules. There are some ways that non-patient care activities can enhance the hands-on patient learning, but it really does not replace it at all. So we started in July, of course, when the shelter in place went into place, our students were not in the clinical setting, but we started in July with bringing our students back into the clinical setting with the commitment that we would keep them there unless one of two things happened. And of course, we had the caveat of, as far as we know now, this is our plan. But our plan was to keep them in the clinical setting unless PPE became such an issue that we just didn't have enough, and we were, that was at dangerous levels, kind of at crisis levels, PPE, or if we had an outbreak in the student body, if a certain class had a big outbreak in their class, we would rethink it. But we committed early on that we would keep them in the clinical setting unless one of those two things happened. And our students, our students are at a graduate level. So they are, just a few years older. They are very focused on their careers. They're very mature. So thankfully, they've been very responsible young adults. And in fact, we've been able to keep the clinical students in those clinical settings, and it has been very good. For our preclinical students, we have also, we are conducting also what I've heard several of the others say, a hybrid curriculum, where some things are virtual, some things are online. In some courses, we've increased the number of simulated activities, or we've increased the number of other things and decreased the number of in-person, especially large group settings. We've broken up large groups into smaller groups so that we could continue to have some of the labs and different activities. But we're conducting a hybrid curriculum right now for our preclinical students, but we have been able to keep our clinical students in that clinical setting because we need them to graduate in May and to be ready to take care of patients, to join the workforce.
All right, now I have a question specifically for you, Dr. Woodard. Someone wanted to know, as a woman in a leadership position, were you afraid of any political backlash while you were advocating for that mandatory mask mandate, even though it was not mandated on the state level?
Yeah, so there were a number of us in the medical world in leadership positions that really felt strongly that a statewide mask mandate was an appropriate step to take. We felt like it had proven its worth. There was proof that it, not only here in Mississippi, but across the country, that it was effective. It's one of those things that it can't hurt, and is proving, in fact, that it helps. So we felt strongly that a statewide mask mandate was indicated and needed. That was not the opinion that the governor held. He, of course, was aware of my opinion, aware of Dr. Dobbs' opinion, and a number of others. Dr. Claude Brunson with State Medical, we all spoke out. But the governor never did want to do that and want to take that advice and to move in that direction. And there were a number of times along the way when, people would ask questions and what I tried to maintain is it doesn't do us any good as a state or in any way to get in an antagonistic position with the governor. It just doesn't. And he is factoring in a lot of things, politics, messages he's getting from advisors that are not in medicine, all of these things that he's factoring in to make his decision. I had I wouldn't say simplicity because it's never simple, but at least I had what I felt like was the responsibility to speak purely from the healthcare standpoint and make my voice known purely from that standpoint. And then he has to take that along with everything else and make whatever decisions he makes. And I'm glad I'm not a mayor. I'm glad I'm not a governor right now. I know those would be very, very tough jobs. It's hard enough just being in medicine. So I wouldn't say I was worried about political backlash. You don't want to be in a position where you feel like you're out of favor with the governor or other state leaderships, and you certainly don't want to be in an antagonistic position. So I tried to walk the fine line of firmly stating what I felt like was the right thing to do from the healthcare perspective, and then realizing that the governor and other people have to take that as a component of everything they take in to make decisions.
Okay, awesome. This question, again, a question from the audience, and this is for all of you ladies. Being that you are all in positions of power and of leadership in the face of this crisis, we all need to find a way to de-stress. You have to leave it somewhere at some time, because if you can't, if you've depleted your own source, you have nothing to give out to everyone else. So how do you ladies de-stress? For myself, it's candles, music, maybe a glass of wine. So what do you do when you are trying to unwind and find your place of peace? Dr. Taylor, I'll start with you.
Just like to read a good book. I'm an avid reader and hadn't had a chance to read for pleasure much because I was working on a doctorate until May of 2020. So I have been picking up a book and also just enjoying time with my family. My husband, Rodney, and then we have a 17-year-old daughter. So just trying to keep her on track. Actually, Rodney stopped by for lunch and he's right there to wave, hun. Hey, this is how we get to spend time together. I'm on a webinar, he's eating lunch in the background, but it works for us. So family and reading. Got it.
All right, Dr. Graham.
My husband and I enjoy working out together. We do CrossFit early in the morning. We try to run in some 5K and 10Ks when we're up for it. So try to stay healthy. But one thing about that is really spending time with family and exercise. And you have to be intentional about that. You have to schedule it out, make yourself do it, formulate a plan. Can't be haphazard because there'll be too many things to get in the way. So being intentional, really focusing on mind and body and spiritual health, I think all those things are important and should be the priority, because if you're not complete and not feeling healthy mentally and physically, you cannot be the kind of leader you need to be.
President Miller. Oh, unmute.
I'm a runner and I miss having my group runs and the races, but I've been keeping up with my solo running, and recently We have a Pilates studio with Reformer Pilates, and I've been enjoying that a great deal. And that's small classes, and you can wear a mask while you're doing it. So that has helped. And I'm excited. My church is going back to in-person services this weekend with all the protections in place. But I've been, attending virtual church, but it's just not the same.
Okay, Dr. Woodard?
So I have talked to our students a few times actually about what I've called the unexpected gift of time as one of the silver linings of this pandemic. There have been some things that I think we'll take forward and some things that we can view as silver linings. So normally I travel a good bit, and there are lots of after hours meetings and events that we go to. And certainly the events we have missed, some of those things like commencement and whatnot, they're my favorite times of the year when you get to celebrate the students' accomplishments and those things. So that has been very difficult. But the flip side of that is I have had more time with family, more time at home with family, and that has been a positive thing. I really, honestly, I love to walk. I wish I ran. I wish I did CrossFit, but I just don't do those things. But I do love to walk in the warm weather, because I'm an outside walker, not a treadmill walker. But anyway, I'm really not big on relaxing. I just don't do a lot of it. But what makes me kind of recharge and feel good is those moments of kind of basically just puttering around my house, moving things, picking things up, cleaning, organizing. Sadly, that's kind of what I do to relax, is clean. So, I have these last few months, I have gone through some drawers and some closets that I hadn't looked at in 15 years.
Well, let me tell you something, Dr. Woodard. If you get bored, I have a house with 4 little boys. Feel free to come to Ridgeland, and I can help you release some stress. We're about to wrap up. We have about 5 minutes left or so. So I just want to have one more question here from the audience. Someone wanted to know, has COVID revealed new priorities for your institutions, or will you return to your priorities that were evident in 2019? Now, Dr. Taylor, I know that might be harder for you to answer because priorities are different because you're brand new in your role. But I'll get you to weigh in anyway. But Dr. Graham, I'll start with you.
Sure. We launched our strategic plan 2030 during the pandemic, surprisingly. So that was interesting. But everything in our plan was fast forwarded about 2 or 3 years. So we were moving into high flex technology. Bam, we were thrown into it. We're moving into virtual reality. Bam, we were thrown into it. Fortunately, we were able to receive some CARES dollars to help offset the cost of some of this great new technology that we would not have had the opportunity to purchase, so quickly into our strategic plan. So I don't ever see us going back to the institution we used to be, but I do feel like we're moving forward at a rapid pace and we'll be a better institution because of it. So we're going to take all the lessons learned from the pandemic and move forward and find new ways to be successful and to meet the needs of our students and our employees. And so there has been some silver lining moments. Luann, I agree with you. I've spent more time at home this past 9 months than I have in the past 30 years, but it's been rewarding. But the great thing about it is I've seen a spirit of creativity and commitment to doing better and getting better. And I love that about the pandemic. That's what's been so great. People have demonstrated some grit and some can-do attitude. And in my opinion, sometimes it takes a big crisis to move people forward, and we've definitely moved forward.
All right, Dr. Taylor?
Sure. Well, even though I've been here for a short time, I can give an answer to this. Probably 2 points, I would say. One is that this crisis really has underscored for us the need for us to make strategic investments in our digital plan and information technology, because that really drives so much of what we do. And when you can't always do things in person, you have to have the assurance that you have that strong backbone and that folks have the equipment that they need in order to be able to be successful. You know, we're going to be investing in some smart boards. You know, the faculty have said they can teach better using those types of tools. We also just recently made a big move of outsourcing IT so that we could have very competent 24/7 service for our digital plant. So I think that is something that was probably expedited and moved to the forefront. The other thing that I would say is that once we actually get to the point where it is safer for people to actually gather, I think what the pandemic has revealed for us again is that the disparities in our nation are actually highlighted through things like a health pandemic. And I believe that we as an institution need to recommit ourselves to the type of work that Ida B. Wells was engaged in, to be able to level the playing field and provide opportunities for people who have been historically denied those opportunities. And with us being kind of an anchor institution in a small town, it gives us a great platform to assist people who are still a little closer maybe to history than what I'd have observed as a kid growing up in Queens. So I think that our college in the future will definitely be more engaged in some of those issues that affect the quality of life for residents here in Northeast Mississippi and in the Memphis metropolitan area.
Okay, Dr. Woodard?
So I would say nothing has changed about our strategic plan. That big picture idea of where we want to go, what we want to do, the things that are important. But some other things have changed. And I said many times during the last 12 months, we're not going back. We are not going back. We have moved faster than people thought we could. There has been a sense of urgency. And Dr. Graham mentioned this sort of that sense of all hands on deck. We're all in this together. We need everybody to step up. We need everybody to participate. And they have. And that just sense of energy, maybe, that the focused energy has been tremendous. And I don't want us to kind of relax that. I want us to maintain, that all hands on deck, we are going after it with everything we've got kind of mentality. I think that has been fabulous. Also, a piece of it that I think has been really good, again, without changing the plan at all, has been the way that people have learned to support each other. That has been new and different. Students have had to be creative. Student and faculty relationships have had to think of different ways to reach out and to support each other and to be there for each other and to celebrate. When you don't have your normal commencement, how do you celebrate these achievements that have happened? So that has been inspiring, really, the way that people have been creative in supporting and celebrating. And then just to add on to what Dr. Taylor said about highlighting the disparities, this pandemic really has shined a light on something we all knew about our country and our nation and the healthcare disparities that are there. And I'm speaking to healthcare disparities, but whether it is from the standpoint of access to treatment to outcomes, it has sort of pulled back the covers and said very loudly, you need a stronger response. And I have seen our faculty and our students and all of our folks here having discussions in the last 2 months in a more open and vigorous and elevated way than we were this time a year ago. And again, that is something that I say, we're not going back. We're going to stay where we are and we're going to move forward from here. A number of things were sort of accelerated maybe and forced on us. And that has been, again, one of those silver linings from this whole experience.
President Miller?
Actually, we were scheduled to start our new strategic plan back in the fall and just kind of put a little stall on there while we figured things out, and we're getting started on it right now. As Dr. Woodard mentioned, I think the big things, academic completion, degree completion, retention, those things will always be priorities. But I think the way that we get there and the objectives and what we use to measure will be different. And I think the events of this year, diversity, equity, inclusion, and access have become so much more important that we address that and that we have those conversations. And I do see that being a much bigger part of our next strategic plan as we move forward.
Awesome. Well, we're going to wrap up. As we wrap up, I just would like each of you, because it was a question, 30 seconds or less, 30 seconds or less. The best piece of advice that you have been given on your leadership journey. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it, as I thank everyone for being a part of this and for logging on and for staying on. So many people stayed on and listened the whole time. And now we'll go to you guys, 30 seconds or less, the best piece of advice that you have been given in this leadership journey. And President Miller, I'll start with you because you are nice and bold right here on my screen.
Okay, I would say just listen. Get out on campus, listen to people, let them know that you hear them, and be ready to change. As I always tell people, you know, tell me if you see I'm about to make a big mistake, let me know. So making sure that I'm accessible for that kind of frank conversation.
Awesome. Dr. Woodard.
So 2 quick things I'll say. One of them is sort of a voice in my head that I hear that years ago when I was a student, an upper level resident said this to me casually and almost in passing, but it stayed in my head and I've never forgotten it. And I hear that voice from time to time and it says, "You are stronger than you think you are." Then the other thing is, especially in walking into situations where there may be some disagreement, you're on one side, you've got to work with another, assume good intentions. Start from a place in your communications and your relationship of assuming good intentions.
Okay. All right. Dr. Taylor.
Well, what came to mind for me is the scripture, without a vision, the people perish. I think a lot of times you can get focused on being transactional and checking things off your list, things that need to get done for your institution. But we have to remember that when you're in a leadership position, whether it's at the top or in the middle, that people are looking to you for inspiration.
All right. And Dr. Graham, why don't you wrap it up for us?
Sure. I said at the beginning, tongue in cheek, we shouldn't waste a good crisis. But the reality of it is sometimes things like this force us to do things to move us out of our comfort level. So I think that what I've learned from the pandemic is to not be afraid to take risk. We're in a situation now where there are no rules. We don't have all the answers, but you have to step out there, change the sails and try to catch the wind and redirect and do things you've never done before and, you know, try to make a difference. So be positive.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, for being a part of this. Mississippi in good hands with you esteemed women in these leadership positions. It was an honor to be a part of this panel. I learned a lot and I enjoyed listening to each of you. Thank you for being a part of this. You can see in the comments where everyone has enjoyed meeting you all. So thank you for being a part of this. Latoya, I'll turn this back over to you.
Thank you all for your participation today. It has meant so much to us. We've learned a lot, and it just means the world that you took time out to be with us on today. I want to tell all of our participants, don't forget to register for next week's webinar. And with that, everyone, please stay safe and have a good rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.